Pretty tragic stuff that happened yesterday. A Texas elementary school shooting. This complete lunatic went into a school, elementary school, and shot a bunch of children. 19 children are dead, and 2 adults, including a teacher that literally risked her life and died saving her students. So, our hearts are with the families affected by this incredible tragedy, the community. It's just completely
it's always
unthinkable.
Devastating.
It's very devastating.
I read on NPR that this is the 27th school shooting this year, and it's definitely a problem that we've seen grow over the last decade or so, right? Per usual, the argument is going to end up falling on
gun control,
right? The left is going to push for gun control, and the right, per usual, is going to be on the defensive to that.
Right, which is unfortunate because they don't even wait 24 hours to politicize a tragedy. I think within hours or an hour of this tragedy, there was already, of course, our left counterparts just going on Twitter and on Instagram, blaming Republicans, the NRA, just starting to use this as a political tool. They don't even let the families grieve, which is, again, disgusting and unfortunate.
Everything just turns into a political topic, and the real problem doesn't get addressed.
Right.
And it's the fact that, the shooter was an 18-year-old. This is practically a child.
Right.
And, we heard a lot about it back in 2020 when we saw that suicide rates actually skyrocketed amongst young adults during the pandemic.
I mean, the argument's always going to be that we need to blame the gun and have more gun control because allegedly these guns are so easily accessible to people, even people with mental health issues, then they'll go on a shooting spree and tragedies like this happen, right? And they never want to talk about the person. Like right before starting this podcast, I was on Instagram and I saw this tweet by Sajar. I don't know. I guess he also has a show, and he says it appears that people in Uvalde, which is where the tragedy happened, knew a lot about Ramos and his problems before shooting. Neighbors say they saw cops at his house multiple times. Friends say he did a lot of freakish stuff, like cut his own face for fun, and people say he had multiple fistfights in the last few years, which is obviously not to excuse that behavior, from that to going to kill 21 people, but there are signs. These are red flags.
It raises questions. Correct. That these are kids that are already showing signs that they are potential danger. And, I think that the conversation doesn't shift often enough into
mental health.
And are these kids truly getting the support that they need? It's really different times than what I remember things being like when I was in school. Social media has really changed.
We've seen teen suicides and kid suicides from bullying. Like we just saw a really, really bad one. It was a couple months ago. I want to say like 3-4 months ago, where parents found their 12-year-old had hung himself with his favorite sweater, and his sisters found him. It was extremely, extremely disturbing. And it all had to do with bullying that the parents were not aware of. They had no idea that the kid was being bullied. He ended up committing suicide. It's not the first one. As you mentioned, that mental health issues with teens, with kids, there's a statistic right here, 22.3% spike in ER trips for potential suicides by children aged 12 to 17 in the summer of 2020 compared to 2019.
But nobody wants to talk
about that. And this is by the
that.
CDC, by the way. Nobody wants to talk about it.
I recall us going into school board meetings and moms pleading about their child's mental health.
Right.
And that the concern behind the mask and the restrictions that were being put on these children, way past the point where COVID was already a concern. Like adults had gone back to regular work. There was mask mandates lifted everywhere else, and it was still going on at schools. And it's almost like that direct correlation with the fact that there was this increase in suicide rates amongst these kids when completely ignored, which then
but it's been like that for a long time. When we talk about propaganda, when we talk about all the pharmaceuticals, you put all these kids on Adderall, they're in elementary school. and middle school.
Yeah. I mean, throw into the mix when you're now dealing with, the
Gender.
dysmorphia that goes on it seems like kids are being exposed to this confusion at a younger age. I think that's a process that's probably complicated enough to somebody who's struggling with their gender identity, and then to kind of impose this on children that are already dealing with very high hormonal responses to life. That's what happens when you're a teenager.
Right.
Hormones are all over the place, and it's kind of created this perfect cocktail of danger for children, and it's truly unfortunate that the conversation on both sides always goes back to the gun control, and very little do we see about what's being pumped back in to help these kids deal with the current mental
Or
health
security
crisis.
measures, right? So one of the things that we do know about this, this murderer is that he came in through the back door. There was an armed security guard on property. And I believe it was a custom border patrol agent, the one that shot him. He was also shot. He survived. But then there's the conversation of, why don't we have more security in schools? If there's only one security guard, he can't be everywhere in the school. This kid came through the back door, right? And
there's all sorts of actual security protocols, some kind of legislation that was passed in Texas that actually required all sorts of heightened security measures, like at doors, and metrics that you need, biometrics and stuff that need to be in order for somebody to be able to enter the building.
Right.
And still, if we don't address, because, let's go back to the conversation in 2020 where people wanted less police presence.
That's something else. And I think it happened in a state where they actually got rid of, I can't quote the state right now, where they wanted to get rid of police at schools. And it's coming from the Democratic side, right? So it's unfortunate.
Did you have cops at school?
I think we did. I remember there being security guards